is strong, the water's deep. My heart is heavy and my mind won't sleep. Oh, can you hear my fear? It breathes. I need to know if you're the shadow I can see. I wanna run to you when the waves break through. I wanna run to you and not turn back. There's no turning back, nothing in the past. My eyes are on you again. Can't see nothing at all but your outstretched arms. Help me believe it. Though I falter, you got me walking on water.
Well, I'm going to invite us just to sit down for a minute, because we get to do something really exciting this morning. We've got a baptism today. So if you've never been a part of baptisms at Westwinds, that cheering right there is a cue. This is how we do baptisms. Baptisms for us are not somber. It's a celebration. It's a celebration of new life. It's a celebration of someone, yes, centering their lives on Jesus and experiencing the change that happens from that. But also, we celebrate the ripple effects of that, right? That as one individual change, that affects the people around them and affects the people around them. And this is what Jesus is doing in us and through us and around us. And that, my friends, is good news. Now, we actually baptized 2 people already today at the first service. So here's what I want to do. I want to practice celebrating because we have some people in the room that are a little bit stiff, all right? So we're going to practice this together. We've got the kids in the room, some of them here. You guys want to help? You cheer loud? All right, we're going to get loud, okay? So we're going to, on the count of 3, let's celebrate the baptisms that already happened. 1, 2, 3. That's good. Not bad, except you're all still seated. On the count of 3, let's do better. 1, 2, 3. Okay, sit back down. Okay, now that we know how to do this, let's go. Here we are.
The ocean singing the song of grace. But if I'm honest with myself, I'm still afraid. I wanna run to you when the waves break through. I wanna run to you and not turn back, no turning back. There's no turning back, nothing in the past. My eyes are on you again. Can't see nothing at all but your outstretched arms to help me believe it. Oh, I falter, you got me walking on water. I was sinking like a stone again. I was halfway in the grave and then I looked up and saw your face again. You pulled me out of the water. There's no turning back, nothing in the past. My eyes are on you again. Can't see nothing at all but your outstretched arms. Help me believe it. Oh, I falter. You got me walking on water. Though I falter,
Well, it's been quite the week in Jackson County, hasn't it? Anybody still without power? Wow. Yeah, we got some brave people in the room. There's actually a couple folks in the band today that are still without power. I've been so impressed by our teams. There's a lot of different teams that make Sunday happen here. There's kids and people who prep the lobby and make coffee, and obviously there's the teams that we see, and then there's teams in the booth that we don't see, and people working backstage in the live stream areas. And all of these teams adjusted multiple times this week. At the start of the week, we were planning on being in this room and doing church like we always do it. And then Wednesday night, we had this storm, and we lost power everywhere, and we were told we weren't getting power back until Monday. And so as of Friday, we were planning on doing our gathering in the lobby with natural light and a little generator outside and running a single cord inside, and our teams all adjusted, and the band was going to change how they arranged their songs, and everyone was getting ready, and kids people, we were going to do family style, so all the kids people were letting that go. And then we got our power back on Saturday morning, right? And so then all these text messages are happening, and I'm getting text messages from Aaron, who we just saw, and Kiki, who leads our kids area, showing me texts from people in our community just adjusting and adapting and stepping up to come together again on this morning and make all this possible. I just think we have some incredible people serving around here every weekend. And so if you need some better friends in life, I would just suggest joining a team, because there's some awesome people on these teams. So we started our Lenten journey. So this would be considered the first Sunday of Lent. But Lent doesn't start on Sunday. It starts on the Wednesday before the first Sunday of Lent. You following that? Okay. So Lent started on Ash Wednesday. And Ash Wednesday is this gathering where we come together and we remember our source. Like the famous tagline from Ash Wednesday is, "From dust we have come, and to dust we will return." Right? From our source, we will come, and to our source, we will return. We're reminded of our mortality, right? To kind of bring into perspective. But it's also a time then we look at the creation story, right? So we also remember that God created everything and declared it what? Good, right? That God declares everything good, which I think is a really important thought, because the Lenten journey can get a little bit heavy, right? The Lenten journey focuses eventually on this death of Jesus, some really heavy stuff in the story. And certainly we get to Easter and celebrate resurrection, but this idea that God made everything and God made it good is this truth that we get to hang on to as we journey through the Lenten season. At the end of the creation story, is these instructions to God's people to multiply, right? To be fruitful and multiply. And so humans were placed in the story to take care of God's creation and populate the earth, right? What a beautiful command, right? And God's people in the story, they do this. They have lots of sex, right? And so they just multiply, and kids are being born, and a group of people are populating and growing, and God's people are populating and growing, and there's more and more and more people. But as a group of people grow, that often, and still today, becomes a threat to world powers. Do you know that's how the world still works today? Right? The people who have power are always paying attention to the people who might come along and take it away. And this happens in the Bible too. In the narrative of the story, God's people are growing. And so Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world at the time, enslaves God's people. And so this is the book of Genesis and moving into the book of Exodus. And as God's people continue to be more faithful, even in the midst of being enslaved, as they develop more of an identity in God and they self-organize in ways, Pharaoh becomes a harder and harder ruler and takes more and more away from God's people. And God's people in the midst of this cry out to God, "How long, O Lord, must we wait? God, when will you rescue us from the hand of Pharaoh?" And as the story goes, God hears the cries of his people and sends someone by the name of Moses to approach Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, and just let him know, "I'm here to take my people away from you," right? This is the story. And what's amazing in the story is you would think at this moment, right, that Moses would come in, rescue God's people, and then they would just like step into this beautiful land flowing with milk and honey, right? That's certainly, like if God's people were in slavery and God rescues them from slavery in a dramatic fashion like he did, where he's leading them into would be with this beautiful, maybe this self-healing place with lots of yoga and boba tea, like this is what I imagine how it should be. But that's not how the story goes. God actually leads God's people into a desert to wander for 40 years. See, because there's this overarching wisdom in the story that God wanted to prepare God's people for the promised land. That there were some things in them that would affect the way they act on the external that needed to be reconciled or reckoned with. See, in the biblical narrative, you can even begin to see throughout Scripture as depending on where people sit in the power dynamic of society, changes how they approach their life. See, for a lot of God's people, they grew up in slavery. Actually, for all of God's people at this point, would have grown up in slavery. And so part of wandering the desert was freeing their heart from, can I use a church word? Sin? Was freeing their heart from the sin of believing they weren't enough. Right? And so there was all kinds of ways this showed up for God's people in the desert. There's all kinds of ways that this would get expressed in their life, that you certainly are enough, that the God you worship is enough, that being called by God is enough, that you don't need all of the things that you think other places need, other people groups need, that you don't need all these other gods, that you don't need to work 7 days a week to prove your value, that you don't need to bicker with each other and fight with each other, you don't need to work this ladder scheme where you're trying to get ahead of the other. You don't need to do any of that because you are enough, right? So God was rooting this out of them in the desert. But there was also the external reality where God was changing their desires. See, being enslaved also meant that inside of God's people was this desire not to be free just from slavery, but then someday to have power over other people. And so God in the desert is working this out of God's people too. See, the sense was, right, if God just leads them into the promised land right away, what are they going to do? Well, they'll enslave other people. And do you know that God is against all forms of slavery? All kinds of slavery and any kind of system that promotes and keeps slavery going, God is against that. That's not in the Genesis narrative. That's not good. And so God is working with God's people in the desert. But also in the narrative as the reader, I think it's asking us also to contend with the ways that we promote enslavement. Certainly we could talk about that in the practical sense, but generally the ways that we are a part of systems or the things that we believe in our own lives that continue to uphold, can I use the church word again? Sin? See, as you read the story, it's actually shocking. It's shocking how people of privilege in the story have such distance from slavery that they can lie to themselves about how their lifestyle affects other people. It's really jarring in the biblical narrative. And so God, through the narratives of the desert and the way these stories were told throughout the history of God's people, it was also meant to help root us out of the ways that our power or our privilege or the things we hang on to affect other people. But it's also true that this mentality plays into the way we view sin, can I use that word again, in our own lives, right? That it's privilege that allows us to pretend that there is no sin in our lives, that there is nothing in me that needs to radically change. And so this time in the desert just shines a light on so many layers of what it is to be human, but not just what it is to be human me by myself, but the way that my decisions and my life and my postures and my beliefs affect the world and people around me. This is the invitation to journey. This is the season of the desert for God's people. And so Lent becomes this tradition throughout church history that we go on every year together, where we prepare ourselves to go on this journey, where God might root out some of the darkness or the sin in our lives, but God also might awaken us to the ways that those things affect other people, but also where God might remind us that we certainly are worthy. We don't need to work for our belonging or continue to live in those ways, that there certainly are different ways to look at the world, and Jesus invites us to look through a very specific lens. Him. A lens of sacrifice, a lens of goodness, this story that is rooted in everything God created being good, and how humanity can so often drift from that goodness, but not just out there, but in here too. And so we go on this Lenten journey every year and wrestle with these things and the ways they show back up in our lives. It's a beautiful journey. It can be a difficult one, but it's an intentional one. I don't think we can Lent well by accident. It's really hard to end up at the top of a mountain by accident, right? These pilgrimages or these journeys that we go on them on purpose. And today I hope to invite us to journey. You know, as we look through the narrative of Jesus, and we will, as this Lenten journey moves forward, more and more talk about the journey of Jesus to the cross, and there's all these people around Jesus. And I think these people around Jesus, you know, the way these memoirs are written are to help us maybe identify with different people who are with Jesus on this journey. Because we all respond differently in a pilgrimage. You ever gotten lost before with your family? Right? Some people are like, it's no big deal, it's all good. Someone else is like losing their mind, right? Someone else is like, but when are we going to eat? Right? Let's ration the snacks. Don't eat that chip, you know? Like everybody responds in these moments together, and this is true of the Jesus narrative as well. You know, one of these characters that we see a lot in the narrative is this character of Peter. Because as Peter is faced with his own mortality or his own sin or the things inside of him, Peter responds in different ways, right? There are times when people are coming to attack Jesus, to take him away, and Jesus is reaching for his sword as if to kill them or if to fight them with violence, and Jesus would rebuke Peter and say, no, that's not the thing we're doing. That's not the world we're building together. That's not the world we're co-creating together. But then there are other times when Peter is so ashamed of himself that he's hiding from Jesus and protecting himself and trying to pretend that the sin in his own life doesn't affect other people. But Jesus also, with great compassion, approaches Peter in these moments, right? No, that's not it either. That's not it either. There's another way. There's another world we're building. I think sometimes it's difficult for us to maybe look at the ways that the things in us affect other people. But I think if we pause for a minute, and this is something that a Lenten pilgrimage can do, it's not that hard if we'll pause, right? If we're willing to consider and open our eyes. I mean, let's just take one small thing, which is actually maybe a big thing, but pornography. You know that pornography is more accessible in our world today than it's ever been. And I think it's easy for someone who is addicted to pornography or struggling with pornography to think about this only affects me, right? It's just me and my computer. I'm by myself. How does this affect other people? When we take a step back from pornography, we can assess the ways that we are investing in a culture that is enslaving people all over the world. That when I participate in this behavior, I'm promoting and investing in an economy that is enslaving vulnerable people worldwide. But then beyond that, when we look at the science behind pornography, it's rearranging people's brains and affecting people's emotional attachment capacities and how they view the world. So now it's affecting their relationships with their spouse or their friends or their kids. And then anybody who is a counselor or has ever been to counseling, is a therapist or ever been to therapy, will tell you that those things play themselves out through generations, don't they? Like the way we relate to our children will affect the way they relate to their children and their spouse in the future. Right? You see how we can convince ourselves that these things are so small and that it's just me. It's never just me. And so Lenten is both an internal journey and an external journey. It's recognizing the connection. And we could do this with all sorts of things in our life. I've shared a few times about my family. I come from generations of alcoholism, abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all of it. It's all there in my family tree. Specifically on my mom's side, my grandfather was he was a really terrible man. And most of his kids left as soon as they could. But his father was a terrible man. And what's amazing, though, is I've been able to bear witness as a kid how my parents began to produce healing in their life. In some really vulnerable moments, turned to Jesus, and Jesus rearranged our life. But that's not been without challenges, right? There's been times, even post-Jesus, that the past has shown up in random ways. It's shown up in our home or shown up around a table, or there's certain situations that we've gone through together that has brought up some feelings or emotions or even behaviors from the past that we thought were so far gone. But what's been so amazing about my mom and dad is how we've continued to walk through those things, that I had a front row seat to watching baptism, resurrection, change happen in their life over and over and over again. And so Lent is this journey where we're reminded that we don't have to run from our past. We don't have to pretend anymore. And the reason we don't have to is because, friends, we know where the story ends. Resurrection. For God's people in the desert, they didn't know when it was going to end. For Jesus' disciples, they weren't sure when he was going to resurrect. We live on the other side, and we know how the story ends, which is the power, which what gives us the courage to not pretend, to look, and to go on this kind of journey. As you came in today, we all should have got this piece of paper. And we tried to just kind of loosely lay out a bit of a map of the journey. I want to take just a few minutes today and look at this map and maybe just talk about some of the stopping points along the way, right? So Wednesday was Ash Wednesday. We talked about that. This is I'm going to try and say this word, Invocavit, I'm not even going to try, right? It means invite. It's like this invitation to journey. That's what we're doing today. That's what I'm trying to do today, is invite us to go on this journey together. Next Sunday will be Remansir Sunday. It's this idea that we remember the things that God has done in our past to give us the courage to face the things coming in our future. Right? We remember that God has been faithful to us before, which will maybe allow us to face some of the scariest things in our life right now. Oculi Sunday is the next Sunday, which is all about oculi, just means it's eyes, right? It's about looking, it's about seeing. It's about having the courage to look at the dark places in our life, but also to look at the dark places in our world. Because sometimes it's easy and often preferable to be blind to those things, right? So Oculi Sunday is this reminder that we can look. As people of the resurrection, of people who know where the story is going, we can look and work towards good news. Latter Sunday is a Sunday that just means rejoice. And folks, if there's a Sunday, like if you're like a nominal churchgoer, right? If there's a Sunday I would recommend circling on your calendar, it's that Sunday. We are going to rejoice. And the next Sunday is when the story gets difficult to follow. It gets really, really tough. And so there was this tradition in church history to look ahead at what resurrection looks like, right? Before we take the tough journey, let's remember where the story goes, you know? And so we spend an entire week declaring what is good. We spend an entire week rejoicing in the good things. We'll spend an entire week where, you know, you can give yourself permission to treat yourself. You know, like if there are things in your life, if there's self-care, if there's things in the community of goodness that you want to point to and participate in, that's the week, and we've got some really fun stuff that we're working on for that week. I'm just saying, if you miss it, you're going to miss it, okay? And then the next week, okay, is when we start to take the descent. The next weeks are Passion Sunday and Palm Sunday. This is where we begin to follow Jesus in his days leading up to the cross. And then Palm Sunday will follow Jesus into the city where he's approaching crucifixion. And we'll walk through that. The Maundy Thursday is where we look at Jesus' last moments with his closest followers. Good Friday is when we really face death. But then Easter Sunday, we'll gather together. We're going to do 3 services on Easter to make sure there's room for as many people as we can pack in to celebrate the reason we do what we do. Jesus' resurrection. Jesus' resurrection. I hope you'll intentionally go on this Lenten journey. If you've been considering maybe, trying to put some more regular practices in your life to center Jesus, Lent is just an open invitation to do so. That it could be just making it a point to be here on Sundays. Maybe it's committing to being willing to look, being willing to consider the way these things affect your life. Maybe it's joining a table and saying, you know what, I'm going to get out of my, personal bubble and journey with some people through this season. I'm going to open myself up to being maybe just a little more vulnerable. Maybe that's the journey for you. About a month ago, I was at Disney, Magic Kingdom, most magical place on earth. Allegedly. And if you've ever been to Magic Kingdom, the day ends with fireworks, right? Everyone gathers in front of, the famous Disney castle. And literally, this was, the whole day to me was just kind of like, are we still doing this, But the fireworks at the end of the day, the most amazing fireworks I've ever seen. And I'm not exaggerating. It literally was the most amazing fireworks show I've ever seen. It was incredible. And it was so incredible that I had my phone out and I was ready to get video of this. And as I was looking through my phone, I could see all these other people with their phones out. And I had this moment, like, what am I doing? Like, it's the most amazing fireworks show I've ever seen. And I'm looking through a screen this big with a bunch of other people looking through a screen this big. And so I put my phone down, and I put it in my pocket, and I just stood back and said, this is amazing. Someone designed this. Someone created all of these fireworks. Someone designed when they take off and when they go. Someone designed there was like lights hitting the castle and really sentimental Disney moments being projected on the castle. Someone created all that. Tinkerbell like flies in the sky over top. Someone figured out how to do that. This is an incredible moment. And all of these people are experiencing on a screen this big when it's going on all around us. Do I need to segue this? I mean, isn't this what's going on? I think so often our lives can be we can just come to this place where we're so consumed with the calendar and the schedules and the bank accounts and the stress and all the things, and our world just starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so every year the church approaches Lent. And it's a reminder that there's this whole thing going on around us. Someone made all of this. There's this incredible fireworks show going on in the world. God's doing good things. Resurrection is happening all around us. And Lent helps us put our phone in our pocket and pay attention to what's going on. I want to finish today by looking at Jesus' invitation to journey. We'll return to this passage later in Lent. But this is what Jesus says to his disciples in Mark chapter 8. Jesus began to teach his disciples the human one must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, the legal experts, and be killed. And then after 3 days, rise from the dead. He said this plainly, but Peter took hold of Jesus, there's Peter again, and scolding him began to correct him. Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, then sternly corrected Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking God's thoughts, but human thoughts." After calling the crowd together as disciples, Jesus said to them, "All who want to come after me must say no to themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives because of me and because of the good news will save them. Why would people gain the whole world but lose their lives? What will people give in exchange for their lives?" Some translations of this say, "What will people give in exchange for their souls?" Lent is a pilgrimage that gives us perspective. Gives us perspective. You know, you could climb a mountain, right? You go on this mountain climb, put the work in of getting up this huge mountain. You go in all the valleys and the dips, and you feel the rocks in your feet, and you feel the hunger pains in the backpack, and you go through this journey. But some would say it's worth it, right? You get to the top of this mountain and look around. Right, there's this experience of standing on the top of the mountain when you put all this work in to get there. But, you know, if you were independently wealthy, you could hire a helicopter to fly you to the top of the mountain and drop you off. I think the top of the mountain for us will be Easter Sunday. And I do think there's going to be some people there that are going to get dropped off at the top, right? And it's so awesome. We'll be so happy to have those individuals with us. And I hope, you know, for many of us, we got to get dropped off at the top of the mountain 5 or 6 times before we consider that it's maybe worth it to climb the mountain. But I think there's going to be those among us that will walk this journey with intention. And boy, standing on the top of the mountain that day is going to be good. It's going to be so powerful when we celebrate resurrection, and it's more than this abstract idea. And it's more than just like God did a thing in my life 20 years ago. But we've climbed this mountain, and we can point to some stoppings on the pilgrimage to say, man, I am a different person because of the Lenten journey, not one a long time ago, or not because I've experienced it from a distance, because I walked it. I climbed this mountain to get here. I want to invite us in this season to put our phones away, climb the mountain, be intentional on the journey. Will you come with me on this journey? I hope you will. Let's pray together, and then we'll sing together one more time before we go. God, I think Lent is really cool, and that's a weird thing to say because of how tough the Lenten journey is, but how amazing that for thousands of years, literally thousands of years, Jesus following people have taken this season to follow Jesus and prepare ourselves to follow Jesus to the cross, to consider the crosses in our own life, to consider what that means in us, to consider what that means through us, and to consider what that might mean around us. That we journey together and dark spaces and hard spaces, knowing that we eventually get to Easter Sunday. It's the celebration of resurrection. And so, God, I pray in this season that you'd give each of us the courage to journey, the courage to participate, the courage to climb the mountain rather than taking the helicopter, the courage to put our phones in our pockets and learn to see the fireworks show going on around us, maybe for the first time or perhaps again. In a weird way, God, we look forward to this journey with Jesus again this year. Amen.
God made me like a seed, planted in good soil, and not on the rocky ground that I've been treading on lately. God made me like a seed, plant me in your garden, and keep me away from all of the thorns, the thistles, and the weeds. 'Cause you are holy, and I'm unworthy, but you are making me holy. God, make me a shining light, place me on a lampstand, 'cause I've been hiding away in the dark for quite some time. God, make me like a mustard seed, though I may be small, I know you're growing something big deep down inside of me. 'Cause you are holy, and I'm unworthy, but you are making me holy. Do you want to sing that? You are holy, and I'm unworthy, but you are making me holy.